Well, it's hard always to exactly pinpoint the reasons. So this is a continuing trend in South Korea that over the last few years they have moved progressively towards a more well-regulated market. They have been aligning their regulations, and although the movement of this legislation through the National Assembly and the cabinet was relatively quick, there is a 6-month grace period. But it also presents complications if you're a global exchange and you have a mixed order book where you've got orders coming in from everywhere and you're trying to fulfill them. Separating out that order stream means creating an entirely separate infrastructure, which means that if you don't have a large amount of business in South Korea, it might not be worth it.
Okay, but what about the larger issue of bringing about more accountability, pinning responsibility on the exchanges on how they go about doing this business as the business expands by itself, as the market expands by itself, and also bringing in more transparency in the system? Do you think they've gotten it right in South Korea?
South Korea has already a really good infrastructure and set of rules around kind of real name requirements. And so all they're doing is this continuation of this process. I don't think it's fair to just for me to say, is it good or bad? I would say it does bring them into consistency with the other exchanges, right? The banks are relatively conservative. Of the 100 or so exchanges in the South Korean market, only 4 currently have those kinds of relationships with the banks that comply with the real name rules. And so it's conceivable that if they're not able to establish those relationships within the 6-month window, they will have to exit the market. So it's not an easy regulation to meet, but it's not necessarily an unfair one.
Will there be any impact, or at least a noticeable or meaningful impact, on the cryptocurrency prices themselves from this regulation, especially if other jurisdictions around the world are going to be closely watching the South Korean experience, to see whether or not it's a good way of ring-fencing risk?
That's really a hard thing to say, right? There is no explicit discussion by the South Korean regulators about the level of, let's say, speculative enthusiasm that exists in the market. But there are certainly politicians who've talked about the lack of intrinsic value and fears that people are speculating in assets that they don't fully understand. So some of this could certainly damp down some of the level of enthusiasm. Right now, Bitcoin typically trades at a premium in South Korea to its market price in the rest of the world because South Korea has capital controls that restrict kind of access to the market. So South Korea might be a little bit of a special case. Certainly in the rest of the world, people are going to watch the South Korean regulators, but it doesn't seem to me like they'll necessarily be easy to replicate the rule structure that South Korea has around real names. They're not just in use in bank accounts, but across a lot of internet access and services in South Korea.